Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Today we're going to New Zealand. My daughter actually is in New Zealand. It's a place that I would love to go and visit. I haven't had the chance, unfortunately, and what with the pandemic and the business about flying and having to have medical interventions and all of that, when the situation was occurred and no one could get on a plane or go anywhere unless you succumb to all of that, I've sort of been a bit nervous about going there. But we're going there today, not so much to see my lovely daughter, but to see a lovely lady who has been very much at the forefront of looking into the persecution of midwives who, like so many people in lots of different professions, didn't want to breach their code of ethics and have been treated incredibly badly. And her name is Irene Chain. She's a journalist, an author, a midwife, and a homeopath, and a speaker as well. Hello, Irene. Welcome to the show.
Well, hi. I'm going to say bonjour because it's that time of day with you, and it's evening with us.
That's right. Yes, and that's one of
Yeah.
the things. Whenever I'm trying to talk to my daughter, trying to arrange it, she's either going to bed or she's getting up, and I'm doing the reverse. So it is one of those things. But it's lovely to have you on the show. You are a jolly lady. We've spoken before we've recorded, and you are laughing. But the subject is actually very serious, isn't it? We've seen
Yeah.
some terrible things happening across in the last 3 years. It's almost hard to believe that we are where we are, considering the things that have happened to people. But you've seen some shocking things, and in your profession, which is all about bringing the new life into the world, it does seem that the powers that want to remain in charge are desperately trying to prevent that from happening.
Well, that's right. But I've got to ask you one question before we start.
Right.
Are you pregnant? Are you a
It's
pregnant
funny.
person?
Am I a pregnant person? Well, I don't have all the facilities to be a pregnant
Well,
person.
okay. So if you were, I'd have to ask you to leave the room because midwifery council says so.
Oh, really? So if you're
Really.
pregnant, so what? So if you are a woman and you are
Mhm.
pregnant, you have to leave the room for.
That's right, because they suspended me when I'd actually resigned, and they seen that part of the midwifery practice, so I can't share my knowledge with anybody.
Oh, right. Well, members of the audience, of course, I have no idea whether they're pregnant or not. And I dare say, for the purposes of this, let's say they're not, so that you can share the information that you have. So if you are pregnant, ladies and gentlemen, just, put your hand over your ears and listen at the keyhole.
And of course,
So,
it's their choice to
absolutely.
stay.
Absolutely. So just tell us a little bit of background to yourself, because I think you told me that you were a coal man's daughter from
A coal
Rotherham.
miner's
A
daughter
coal
from
miner's,
Rotherham,
yes, from Rotherham.
the daughter of Polish refugees that were displaced persons, the Volksdeutschers from Poland.
Wow.
So my grandmother actually used to be the village baby catcher in the villages of Poland.
Is that like the child catcher from Chitty
Yeah.
Chitty Bang
So
Bang?
I think it kind of came down because I never planned on being a midwife. It just happened. I never planned on going to nursing. It just happened. Um, but on my journey, because my sisters had all births and my grandmother gave her stories, and when I ended up going into working in the hospitals, I realized how invasive it was. And it wasn't like the stories that grandmother gave me. So I went on a venture to change it, because the way babies come into this world affects them mentally, physically, and emotionally, and it affects entire communities. So reducing C-section rates, using homeopathy, the natural therapies, clearing the way from past injuries, and all of those things has been like my prime vision. I have a vision, and it's coming. I have a vision of wellness hubs with birth centers, spiritual birth centers, with a dome that opens and closes in the winter, with the
Oh,
quantum healing. That's what's going to come in the future, because I've had the visions, and I've actually drawn out the projects and the costing to give freely to communities if they want to use it. Yeah, because we know we're going to get humanitarian projects coming in the later. So I think I kind of realized I was different all my life. I realized I was different. I didn't really fit into a lot of things, even though I'm a cancer and I'm always helping people, healing people. And I realized that I was on a journey, and that journey has been so incredible because it's taken me through many continents. I was in the Middle East. I saw the Bedouins birth. I've written the book. It's called Three Blind Mice, The Midwife's Tale, and three magical mice take three midwives around the world to show the changes in childbirth. The only way I could do it was use my creativity to put the magic touches in, so you
right.
can jump
Yes.
backwards and forwards in time. So we go to the Baduga temple in India, and the magical mice use the magical things to get the midwives up to date with modern technology and healing and homeopathy, and put it in their heads, and then they travel around. It takes you to Ohio on a buggy ride with the Amish. It takes you all around the world, and it actually shows you how birth should be and how midwives were then, not able to truly be the voice for women, because if they did, they would be attacked. So
Right.
it's a magical story, goes all the
Yes.
way.
But
Uh,
but based on what you've seen, so just enlighten me then, because over here, most people, if they're pregnant, women obviously, if they're pregnant, they're guided into going to hospital, and you go through this rather ghastly process, and it's very difficult. I mean, my children were born 30 years ago, and we had them. We had two at home, and the first one in the hospital, but we had home birth. But going around the different continents, you must have seen lots of different approaches to having children and the birth of children, which is
yes.
and so
And
how does that vary then?
well, I think you've got to go back to when I was in Saudi in the 80s, when you got the Bedouin women that were driven into hospitals, but yet they all birthed in the desert. There was no fear of birth. Babies were 2.5, 2.7 kilos, 90% normal birth rate. Okay. They
90,
didn't have,
90%, right?
yeah. And it was the same in the northeast of England when we worked on midwife units then. It was 90%. Okay. So, but it changed because of the diet. It changed because of all what we were eating. Because I went back to Saudi in 1995, and the babies were 3.7 kgs, and they brought the KFCs and everything else into the country. And the fear of birth. There was women with walking epidurals that you never saw before. And I thought, my goodness, what have they done to birth? Okay,
Yes.
what have
That
they
is
done to these women? And
that is
those
so interesting, because
women,
sorry to interrupt. I'm just
yeah,
wanted to highlight that point. What's interesting there, as you say, because people's diets have changed, babies have got bigger
yeah.
because they're eating highly processed foods.
Yeah, and plus the fact the system doesn't educate the families. What I mean, you go into a birth, what do you know about it? How
Well,
can you
exactly.
contest the system? Because they purposely don't teach you about it. Okay.
Mm.
So what I did recently is, if you go to rumble.com, My Body by Baby in capitals, I actually made 80 videos free of charge. They've got the gifs. They teach you, grandmother, auntie, and uncle, all about it and how to prevent the problems. Because the root is the lack of education to communities that drives the fear. When you are in control, or you know your own body, look, even the midwives that I've worked with as a homeopath and worked alongside them, they don't know how to take care of themselves. So how can they tell you
Right.
how to take care of you?
Yes.
It's been that way for such a long time. I remember working on surgical wards, and when I was young, everybody would come in with an appendix and all these problems, and I'm saying, why are we not preventing it? Why are we not
Yes.
stopping it happening? And I think it was grandmother. uh, we had the chickens in the backyard, and she used to make us the chicken soup when you had cold or you gardened the stage. So I grew up with all the natural things, and
Yes.
couldn't understand why they wouldn't use them. And then when I became a homeopath, I really understood how the body works and how it could heal itself, and all about the energy levels, because each plant, each mineral that you use drives the frequencies through different parts of your body, mind, body, everything, to give it a kickstart to heal. So what happens is that they're not educated. And then you go into hospital thinking that somebody is going to do everything you want, and then you lose control. And then
Right.
you get the postpartum depression. You get the post-traumatic stress disorder, because it's a bit like you're driving a car and you're in control, and then you've got a wet road and you're out of control, and then you go, and this
Yes.
is what happens. So a lot of women were getting post-traumatic stress disorder. And then let me go back a little bit as well, because having 90% normal birth rate in like North Tyneside and the midwife units, well, they've shut that hospital down now, but and in Saudi, and then you go back and you realise that they've only got 6 baby cots in each hospital, right? So only 6 baby cots. And then suddenly they were building all these neonatal units everywhere. You've got
Right.
you've got Newcastle to Sunderland. It's only a stone's throw away, and they were building them everywhere, and they couldn't understand why are they building these massive units. Okay, so I did some research, and I said, well, what were they doing to pregnant women in the late 70s? And I hate to say it, but they brought out the tetanus, the the flu vaccination, and the hepatitis B vaccinations at that time. And if you go into the patencies, look up the patencies, do your research, and you'll find the truth. I'm not going
Right.
to, you need to do your homework to say what I'm saying is right, because I'm not
Yes.
going to tell you this, right? I'm not going to do your homework for you. It's like you've got to go out and think about the big picture. Is it no different to what we're having now? Because we know the miscarriage rates are enormous.
Yes.
We've got the
Well, I
data
think people
telling
can.
us
I
that.
think yes, people are probably putting two
Mm,
and two together from
yeah,
what you're saying. And let's face it, if you've got 90% birth success or birth rate,
yeah.
and then there are medical interventions on a large scale, and that's reducing things, I think people are starting to work that out. And
Yeah.
we saw a lot of that 3 years ago, or was it 4 years
Well,
ago? 3 years ago.
so when I was in China, I wrote, when I was in lockdown, I couldn't get out of the country, and I was stuck in an apartment with no income. So I think it channeled down a lot of it, but I wrote 5 new textbooks for midwives.
Did
Uh,
you? 5 textbooks? Blimey,
a
that's a lot of
thousand a
dedicated
thousand
work.
pages each as the foundations for education, showing them that the placenta can regenerate, that the
Wow.
questionings about cutting the cord stem from the 17th century. But if you go back to 18, was it 1845, was a guy called King, and all the doctors then and obstetricians, they were all homeopaths,
Right.
and they talked about the dangers of cutting the cord early then. And he actually
Yes.
experimented by cutting. If you cut it, the blood spurts out. If it tears, it doesn't. Uh, he was talking about the jaundice babies. You can see that the mortality rates were only 0.1% in 1845, and yet they can't get anywhere near it today. So, you know, it's like you've got to dig into the past. But then I found the universities, because students were coming through, and they're saying, well, we can't use any research more than 5 years old. They were throwing books in the bin.
Really? Gosh.
So they were cutting out the history and the experts and the wisdom.
Yes. And
Yeah,
we've seen that. We've seen that in so many areas, that
absolutely.
this is repeated. You know, this cycle of you can only have this wisdom because everything before is antiquated and is
Mm,
unimportant. And yet we're beginning to realise that actually that many of those things that were talked about 100 years ago, say,
yeah.
were really relevant. And there seems to be a narrative persuading us to go down a different path.
Well, it's like as a professional, because I have a lot of observational skills, observing women, for example, right? So
Yes.
if you're in the hospital setting, a lot of people have never spent 3 days, sleeping on couches while a woman goes into labor, because it's a gradual build up. You're observing the woman, you're observing what her body's doing, right? So when I was
Yes.
in the hospital, when it was all ticky-tacky machines, I wasn't just looking at the baby's heart rate, I was looking at what a contraction patterns were doing at the same time and observing the woman. So my experience was telling me that I don't need to go in and do a vaginal examination because I can see what's happening
Right. Yeah.
through wisdom. And, I can visualize a cervix actually. We've got the skill. You can see it. You don't have to go inside and do anything because we have that gift. And we've got to learn to be able to be in tune with that, right?
Yes.
And to know when to help, when not to help. And when I was at birth, I would sit with my hands underneath. Well, I wouldn't. I'd be writing my books. That's how I wrote 10 books into the you know,
Yes,
because
don't
you
have the
learn to
baby yet. I've
observe.
just been inspired to finish this chapter.
But you see that in the hospitals, you're finding out that they haven't gone through that process. So if a woman goes off the boil and everything's all right, they'll say, "Oh, the labour's slow, so we're just going to kickstart it and we'll put the drip up." And then the baby can't do the dance to come down. Then you get the forceps, then you get the problem. Okay.
Mm.
So when I was like, in 2015, they took me into this artificial area and they said, "Well, you've got to do a shoulder dystocia and you've got to manage it this way." And I said, "Well, I don't do it that way." It's like, that way's wrong.
Yes.
It's like, well, they've realized now after these years it is wrong, right? Uh, but they're not listening to experience, they're not listening to wisdom.
Mm.
And did you know that the medical books in obstetrics were written by doctors that had never been to a birth?
Well, these days, you could tell me stuff, and nothing surprises me. Although it is horrific to learn, though,
These
exactly
things,
that. Yeah.
So my journey's been picking up all of those things. So I have it's like if I go back to 2005, I think I've got my statistic. I think I kept one lot, and it's like, I had 90, I think it was 98% normal birth rate.
Wow.
They have
98.
problems, yeah. Because it's like if you take women through it, mind, body, spirit, and they do the right things, there's only a small percentage chance. I have met like a very small percent where the babies haven't come through, but that you can
Mm.
see that when it happens. But the majority do really well. It's just the fear and it's the lack of education that creates the problems. I did an interview with Rick Bratton this week in America, and many years ago, because of when I wrote My Body, My Baby, and he said, "My goodness, if I'd have read that book, I wouldn't have been thrown out of the delivery room." So, it's like it's getting this knowledge out. Now, the problem is you can't get the books out
You,
to the right places because
right.
the publishing company is corrupt.
Yes.
Yeah. And so one of my books is called Penelope's
Oh,
Project Tales of Winter Run.
say that again. We
Because
just had it froze. It just froze at
okay,
the moment. One
okay,
of your book.
okay. So I learned the scams of the publishing company. It cost a lot of money. So instead of crying about it, I wrote a book, Penelope's Tragic Tales of Self-Publishing, What to Do, What Not to Do, and When to Run.
Right.
So, yeah, so all the books are about life stories, and when you're birthing, when you're with the woman teaches you a lot, but so does grandma who's there, so does the family who's there, because their stories educate you far more than what you're going to read in a book.
Yes, of
And
course.
that's why, we've lost the connectedness with women. We've lost the connectedness with one another that gives out those great birth outcomes. So as you can see, they don't want me in the system because
You're a disruptor, aren't you? You're a disruptor.
Well, you see, I think it's this Polish blood. You mess about with me and I'll give you bigger than the Warsaw Uprising. It's like you stand for truth, you stand for what's right, and your heart is that every birth, every community should be thriving. They should be celebrating it. They should be in a room together. They should learn from each other. We've had the apathy because people have been too busy to learn.
Right.
I think as a midwife, you see all walks of life, and you say to them, well, here's a video you can watch, here's the information. But a lot of these women are still working when they're pregnant. They're paying, two of them are having to work to pay a mortgage 6-7 days a week. They get home, they're exhausted. So how can they learn?
Yes.
And I really believe this is by plan, isn't it? You went back in your old discussions about how it used to be. I mean, when I was born, Dad had a sidecar and motorbike, and there was no phones, and he went to get the midwife, and I popped out, and Granny caught me before the midwife came. How did we manage without phones? We
had community, didn't we? We had community, and people were closer around and knew who we were and our business. Now people are so atomized, and you don't know your neighbours. My neighbour.
The local pub. We used to do charity things. I remember going to this. We used to put, I don't know, elastic bands around our waist and try and carry water from one side of the swimming pool to the other, and climb backwards up the slides and get sponsorship for it, and raise money for charities and get the wet T-shirts. And we all had fun. We knew all our neighbours. We knew everybody, didn't we? And that's been lost, because even here in where I live, I know maybe 3 neighbours, but no one else down the road, because there's such a fast turnover, because the properties are rented.
That's
and
right.
People on the move. Yeah. So that's my life as a midwife. So I knew when COVID came out that it wasn't right, and there's no way I could ever tell a pregnant mum or anyone to take something when you don't know what's in it.
Exactly.
And it was like nobody could coerce me, nobody could do that. And for the first time in my life, because I've always put women first. I've left husband cooking his own dinner when I've been called out to the birth in the night or whatever. I've always put families and everything first. And even though I knew there wouldn't be enough midwives, I could not breach that truth, that code. And I think in the High Court, when I went in there, I clung on to my scope of practice, and I spoke to all the lawyers and the judge, who's supposed to be reforming the system, by the way. And I said, I stand with truth, with my feet on the lens at Timona Nui Akiwa. No one has authority over I, and no judge, no politician, no one can make me breach this code of ethics. And we've got it on record.
Right.
And I don't know where that power came from, but this little coal miner's daughter stood in there
and stood your ground. Amazing.
Stood the ground, and I still stand that ground. So what happened was in October of 2021, we all got the COVID-19 response, right? No jab, no job, mandates. So I took that notification they gave us, and I broke down every paragraph about breaching the code of ethics, the shortage of midwives. We were already short, that
Right.
women would not get the due care. So of course, but I hold you all responsible if any mother and baby dies.
Yes.
I
Well,
put
quite
it down
right.
there. And then I found out that there's an IOA request. I think it was Stu Gray, one of the lawyers, and it was kind of hidden, but it's come out. And the Ministry of Justice were advising the government that it was a breach of the Bill of Rights and just about everything going, basically, breaching all the laws. They were advised of that and they ignored it.
And they, yeah.
Yeah, so I think from putting that letter through, it was like, okay, they're going to come for me now. You better put your armor on, Irene,
Yes.
because they're going to come for you.
Were you worried?
No, because I knew they were coming and I knew it was something I had to do.
Yes.
So it's like I would take anything. My parents taught me that. They brought me up. They'd been through the.
Yes.
You always stand up for truth and you always believe in who you are and let nobody walk over you.
Yes. I mean,
But it's given me.
I was just going to say it's. I mean, I've just, in doing this, I've discovered there's many people like that, but it still seems rare that people are able to take the intimidation and the persecution and still stand up and say, but this is right.
Well, I think it's a gift as well. And then I looked at, well, I'm 60 something here and I'm getting on a bit, what have I got to lose?
Well, there is that, I guess.
What have I got to lose? Somebody's going to feed me. Somebody's going to look after me. If they put me in prison, somebody's going to bring foods I request. And if I'm in the prison, I'll just educate everybody. As long as they're not pregnant.
Yes. As long as they're not pregnant, exactly.
So it was like I did that. And then it came to, okay, we were fired on November the 15th. So I made sure all the women had everything they needed for their pregnancy. So they had lab forms in advance. They had prescriptions if they needed them in advance, which we do. We do that. We give little packages and information. I think when you got to drop 70 women on your books, it's a lot of women to say, well, I'm sorry. And I had a midwife was contracted to me, and she was the only one that could speak the community's language. And I had to say to her, well, I'm sorry. I can't go on. I can't do this. And I was taking phone calls for a couple of months after that, from women, frustrated women, having to hand them over to midwives who were vaccinated.
Yes.
And plus the fact I was ill because I'd come back from China and I'd got information of the waterworks and the drainage pipes, and I'd got tubes up the waterworks thing, and and it's like I was still doing this, and I thought, well, you can't comprehend what it's like to have to let go not just of the women but an entire community you've cared for 20 years.
No,
because
it must have been awful.
We had to let go of. And the midwives out there that have lost their homes and everything, by standing up for this. So it came to, okay, so November the 15th, they fired me, reduced all the contracts. I didn't get the satisfactory responses from that first letter we put through, which I didn't expect. So on December the 5th, I sent them an email. I resigned from Midwifery Council. I can't take my name off your board, your website, but they don't let you remove your name. They put you to sleep so they can police you for the rest of your life.
Right.
Yeah. So
just explain what you mean by that. Just explain what you mean by that when you said they put you.
Okay, so when you register as a midwife, they register you. And you can go onto the website and it'll say, if you're not applying for your practicing certificate, yeah, you can just not do that. But they don't. You can kind of resign, but you can't take your name off the system permanently.
Right. So people still
Yeah,
know think of you as being there, but you're not.
yeah, precisely. They put you to sleep,
Right.
basically. But they put you on house arrest. Call it that. Or
Charming
whatever.
people. Yes. So what did you
So
do
anyhow,
then?
well then, see, I emailed them and said I don't feel safe. Remove my name from the register. Yeah, and that should have been enough because under
Mm.
their act it says anyone can resign in writing and anybody can terminate a contract in writing. But what happened was, so then I sent them a cease and desist order on the 7th, but because of the post, I think they got it on the 31st, and it was saying, I annul and abrogate, and anything after this is trespass. It's a cease and desist order because I am in the private.
Mm.
No contract, I'm in the private. So what happened in between that was a friend of mine, and she, lovely lady from India, and her family couldn't, and she was on my books earlier because I do have a couple of friends. So she was on my books, and what I did is I took her on as a mother because her family couldn't come from India. She was alone. She was petrified. A baby was due within a month. So I said, well, okay, I'll be your mother. You can walk around my garden in early labour and I'll go in and hold your hand. I've got this tube in here, but it's okay. I'm just going to sit there and hold your hand. Not anything else. Uh, but what happened was she came a couple of times in between that time. She was registered under the hospital and they were getting paid for all her care.
Mm.
Well, she came and I think she'd taken this and said the baby wasn't moving. So I just had my stuff and I just checked her in my backyard and, sent her to the hospital and says, she's concerned and she's my friend. She's in my private land. I'm sending her
Yes.
in to you. So I was reported for being not vaccinated working in a clinical setting.
Right. Even
Yeah,
though you're
and
just you're doing a neighbourly thing effectively.
yeah, but the thing is not long after that time is my husband was kidnapped under the pretense of COVID. They nearly killed him in the hospital. I got him out. I gave him ivermectin and homeopathy and managed to rescue him because he would have been gone. And then I was doing his blood pressures and his oxygen levels, but I wasn't taken to court for them. It's
Gosh.
you know. So anyhow, what happened is that when she walked around my garden with the beautiful tomato plants, and it's a third of a section, and I've got fruit trees there, and she was
Lovely.
walking outside because I've got no room in my house for anything. It's like
Right.
I had people staying with me. It's a small house, so it was a beautiful summer's day, so she walked around the garden. And then I said to the hospital, I rang them up and said, well, I'm going to come in the private to hold her hand. Um, and, she's under your care. So the next thing I get is a phone call saying, well, you can't because you're illegal. I said,
You're
what?
illegal.
I'm illegal. What do you mean I'm illegal? I'm coming in to hold a hand. I'm not practicing midwifery. I'm coming
Yeah.
in to hold a
Just as
hand.
a friend. Yeah.
And whatever happens in my backyard, if I've taken a blood pressure reading, you're trespassing. This is private land, right? So anyhow, I called this manager up and said to her, this Emma Farmer, not a nice soul really, and said, if you've got any problems, email me back and I'll meet you in the private and talk about it. But no, she took it on and she wrote to Midwifery Council saying Irene's working in a clinical setting, not vaccinated. So I said, well, okay, well, did they send WorkSafe out to check the tomato plants?
Yes.
This is absolutely ridiculous, yeah? So
Yeah.
after that, Midwifery Council decided, oh, we're not going to let the resignation go. Well, we got the papers for her to resign, but we're not going to do it. And we got an email, oh, we're just too busy. So they didn't let me resign.
So because they didn't let you resign, it meant that that they could set these charges that even if you're at home just helping anybody, they can then claim because you haven't resigned, you're still technically working.
That's right. But you're not working unless you get money. I've
Yes.
never been paid. So there's no work. I've never had any money yet.
Yeah.
So I've never
Yeah.
been paid.
Where's the contract? You
Yeah,
know.
and the ironic thing is the hospital was paid for this woman, my friend, that was walking around my garden.
Yeah.
They were paid for that. Okay. So let's get this right. So then the Midwifery Council decided to have a secret meeting with, well, they sent me an email, I think, on the 13th of January and gave me 5 working days to respond. Well, I'm in bed. I'm sick. I didn't see it. And the next thing, I've got a letter to say they've had a secret meeting and suspended me for walking around the garden, not the garden, but for practicing in a clinical setting.
In a clinical setting.
Not vaccinated, posing harm to the public. Well, we do have an IOA request that 11,000 health professionals were not vaccinated and working.
Right.
Right.
I have to say, your back garden must be immaculate, mustn't it? If it's a clinical setting.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, maybe it's a bit difficult
No bugs.
to swab. It's a bit. You can't swab the birds, can you?
No.
And the poor little hedgehog. I mean, bless its thing. You know, you can't terminate hedgehog.
One would hope not.
No. So then it went on from there about the same time. So the Midwifery Council then reported me to the Ministry of Health, and then we got this beautiful J. Birdsall enforcement officer, attacking me for not practicing and issuing lab forms out. Yeah.
So it just got an absolutely absurd situation then for you.
Yeah, well, so I got so sick of them all that I actually took the Midwifery Council to the High Court. Yeah, because they kept attacking me. So I'm probably one of the first midwives that took them to High Court. Now, I knew that it probably wouldn't get through because it would expose everything, right?
Yes.
But I think I got the divine or something on my side because it was accepted, and as a pensioner it didn't cost me to put the charges in. Okay, I just lodged it in, hoping to get in there. So as soon as I'd lodged in the High Court, the Ministry of Health, this enforcement, lodged a claim against me in the criminal court. Now, is there any coincidence here?
No, I think so. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So I'm taken on for 5 lab forms and in the criminal court at $10,000 each.
Heavens.
The Ministry of Health wanting $10,000 each for each lab form. That was given before you
could get to that. Right.
So it didn't stop there, because then they had this Phyllis Huitiva, who I put cease and desist orders to, who decided she was going to take me on to the Practice Competency Committee. But they were taking me on for 308 lab forms, which is impossible. and 3 prescription forms. And one of the prescription forms was for the 3rd of June, and I was actually under general anaesthesia having surgery on that day.
Oh.
So it gets even better.
So your evidence was accruing then? Had you got into the High Court at this time?
Yeah, because what we've done is we presented all the lawyers and everybody in Midwifery Council. We'd even give them the evidence about the vaccine causing harm and the statistics. So they've all got copies of it. So they've all been willfully blind. So justice will be served on them at a later date. Okay.
Right.
Because it's there. It's been presented. Okay.
Yes.
So the High Court was squashed out.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, well, you see, it was struck out because they thought I was vexatious with my cease and desist orders.
Yes.
And because they couldn't understand English, because, you see, they speak in legalese. Yeah,
as we
so
know. Yeah.
that's what they do, because they did that with the farmers in America, is they strike it out on the same ground over the lands. So I knew this was going to happen. We've caught them out. Yeah. So what happened is that I agreed to go through with this with Inland's Air Water Council with our international investigative team, because I'm a journalist.
Right.
So we've recorded every recording. Right. But it even got better because even in the High Court, when I served the judge of the trust deed and the beneficiary's legal name, she called me Irene very nicely. It was very kind and polite, but when the minutes of her judgment came through, it was nothing like what happened in the court.
Oh, I see. They
And then
edited
we
the.
realised in 2017, my friend Andrew Little from the Labour Party, who I've cooked dinner for, when I was working with the Polish Association and entertained, and I've been to their functions, decided to put a repeal in the High Court rules that no transcriptions and no recordings can be requested. And that if you go in and record, you've got to get a judge's permission.
To record it yourself?
Yeah, but then she's going to edit it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's hardly a public record then, is it?
Yeah, and this judge, Justine Grice, ironically, is it a coincidence? Because in 2017, she was put in place to reform the justice system. I don't know what they're going to reform.
No.
So we got that happen, and I wasn't surprised it was struck out at all. But they did try to charge me $12,000.
Blimey. It just sounds an absolute nightmare. Were other midwives who were standing on their ethics, were they being prosecuted as well in the same way?
They are at this moment. They're put into disciplinary tribunals. One of the midwives was helping a woman on the roadside, and they called her practicing. You can go and help a woman on the roadside, but if you've got a certificate as a midwife, you can't.
Yes. So if you've got all the training and you've done all the right things, then you're stuffed. Whereas who would have no idea and is pulling a leg or an arm, trying to get the baby out and doing all the wrong stuff, I'm fine. Which is, it's absurd.
Well, I told that to Justice Grice in the High Court, the one that's going to reform the justice system. I told her, you can attend a birth, but I can't. This is professional imprisonment. This is treason.
Yes.
I shouted it 3 times
in
the courtroom.
You're a troublemaker, you are, aren't you, Irene?
But it's the truth. It's the truth. What are they doing? I can't walk about the rest of my life with duct tape over here.
No, of course.
So then at the same time, I've got the criminal court now for these 5 lap forms at $10,000 each. And we've gone through 4 judges, 4 hearings for 5 lap forms.
And I'm incredible because you're laughing at it. It's what do you think is the end result of all of this?
Well, I've actually just put a response into the court because I've just sent them this 48-page, you've read it, the investigation report on public notice. Yeah. Into Midwifery Council of New Zealand, the Ministry of Health, the Practitioners Competence Committee, Health Practitioners Disciplinary Tribunal, lawyers, judges and court registrars of the courts of New Zealand. And I've put the Inland's Air Water Council International team would like to thank all who participated in this 2-year investigation into the judges, because that's including the judges, the Midwifery Council, because everything they've written. We have a lawyer that thought I don't know if it's vexatious or he couldn't understand it, but Irene wrote that the thingy-ma-do was an experimental mRNA.
Huh. Which, funnily enough, does seem to ring truth there, does it not?
So now my criminal case is coming up in The 12th, the 14th of February, but it's a very nice judge. Okay, well, let me tell you about the criminal court first. I've never been in a criminal court before in my life. I've never done any harm. I think I've met policemen 3 times. Yeah, the first time was when I was with my first marriage, and I was not just working in the hospital, I was working behind the bar, and he was a DJ, and he'd had just 2 beers, nothing. We were followed by a policeman to our home. He walked in the home, I think it was our birthdays, but he hadn't had that much drink. But we got in, and he had a couple of old Polish vodkas, and there was a knock on the door. The police came in, dragged him out into the car, and breathalyzed him. That's my first experience of policemen. And I thought, can you trust them? And one of the policemen says, I said, well, why is it you do these things? Well, they get promoted on the number of convictions they get. And that was like in the 80s, right?
Crikey.
The second time was probably when a woman that I birthed a baby to was in a road rage with a husband, parked in front of my car and rammed and reversed into me 3 times.
Charming.
So, and then I think and that's basically it, with maybe an odd speeding ticket, but not that much. So that's my encounters with criminal court. So there I am in a criminal court with my name on the board for these 5 lab forms at $10,000 each, right? And I'm looking around, and there's young kids in there, and there's families, and I've birthed 1,000 babies in this community, right? And I know them. So, what's happening to the privacy here?
Yes.
Oh, excuse me, but your midwife's a criminal.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah. And in the beginning, the registrars and the judges wouldn't give their name. We couldn't get names of registrars and judges. We couldn't get them to follow the process. Tracy went in there with me because she knew the process. So that was changed eventually, right? So you go into a courtroom, and there's a judge there wearing a nice little red outfit, and I'm stood there and I'm not scared of her, but I just don't know what she's going to do next.
Yes.
And I couldn't hear what she was saying, so I turned my head away this way so I could hear her. You look at me. You're disrespectful. Yelling at me in the court.
Heavens.
So I said, excuse me, I've birthed 1,000 babies in this community, and I've never been disrespectful to anybody, but I find you're disrespectful to me. Well, I think that's why we got another hearing. So we get on to the next hearing. Still no evidence by this Jane Birdsall. Still nobody was sat there watching me write these lab forms for this $10,000 each. So they've got no first-hand evidence. They lied because the lawyer lied because they hadn't even done an investigation.
Right.
Jane Birdsall did a bit of a telephone thing and wrote a few notes, but no telephone numbers or anything on it. So maybe that's what they pass as an investigation. So we says, well, you can't be a criminal case without an investigation done, can they? Well, they can.
And what I don't understand, if it's criminal, where's the victim?
Well, that's what I said to them. I said to the judge, just as I want trial by jury.
Yeah.
I want a trial by jury. She says, well, it's not arrestable. So I says, well, what am I doing here?
Yeah, exactly.
But then what you find out is that you go into multiple courts because the Ministry of Health or whatever hire their own courtroom and bring in their own judges and their own everybody else. Right?
Well, now, where have I heard that before? I mean, everything is just so corrupt. It's just it's coming to. Do you think that we are at the point now where all of this is spilling out? People are beginning to realise the corruption, the wrong of everything, and that we soon will start righting this. Do you think the ship is?
We're coming together, and I think I think New Zealand will lead this actually because we've got some very smart people, and it's a smaller community.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you can't control a large community.
Yes.
But a smaller one when their heads get together and they're all coming in different directions. Somebody's sorting the rates out, somebody's sorting the lands out, somebody's sorting the mortgages out, somebody's sorting the LRADs out, somebody's sorting the small cities out. So the communities are doing all this, and I think that we're going to come to this tipping point where we're all together.
Brilliant.
And that's what we've done with the bubble in Landsare Water Council, is because it's a bubble. It won't exist in the future as the communities start to administer themselves.
Yes.
But there's got to be a system set up, and this system's being set up organically. Okay. And what I'm learning is that you mirror what they do. When you look back at everything we do, it's like we're just mirroring it. Yeah, if you're looking at, I mean, you need to get Tracy on, because when we revoked the power of attorney, we just mirrored what the banks did and took it back.
Right.
What's good for the goose
but
is
doing
good
it
for the
honourably.
gander.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing it honourably and properly.
And properly, without rate. You see, I think in the beginning with the common law, you go in and it's like, well, I'm not complying, and I heard someone going to the courtroom, right? Because I've been watching this and we've been helping people, but someone went in to the judge and says, "Excuse me, may I have permission to board the ship?"
Well, this is it. When you start taking the mickey out of them, they suddenly lose their power, don't they? If you're,
they do.
I did hear the story that somebody using that, kept saying, Mr. Let's call him Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, will you stand in the dock? And he said, my name's Fred, and that's how you'll call me. And they said, no, Mr. Jones, you've got to go to the dock. So he took out a copy of his birth certificate and put that in the dock and said, Mr. Jones is now in the dock. And, you just think, well, you're taking a mickey out of the nonsense of the court, because it is a load of nonsense. And you reduce the fear.
Yeah, and you just had that recent interview where, a lot of people are winning by, no contract and really standing up, and they're prepared to get arrested and things. But it's like, I knew that, just like your interview the other day, it's like, you've got to prove they're doing this.
Yes.
Yeah. So play them at the system, go through it and let them hang them. It's the art of war. They hang themselves in whatever they're writing back to you.
Yes.
We've got the criminal court. I mean, it's either what did I put on the bottom of this? Please find attached the report from the International Investigation Team, Inland Air Water Council International, for that matter, as the Inland Air Water Council International Investigative Team reports, this matter is either of procedural incompetence or for pecuniary gain, encumbrance, and malicious prosecution. I accept your offer. Irene conditionally accepts your invitation to attend trial on the 12th to the 14th of February. As a special appearance for that matter. Our conditions are: all evidence provided by the plaintiff, Jane Birdsall, Enforcement Ministry of Health, and Hannah Reid, lawyer, prosecutor, is as per Evidence Act 2016. The prosecution witnesses of Jane Birdsall, head of TGR Ultrasound, head of LEPTAS, and midwifery advisor, submit first-hand evidence of their presence on the dates the 5 laboratory forms were created by Irene. Creation of these documents was before resignation. The suspension is after resignation, and there were 2 suspensions. That the district court provides a financial forensic audit on the legal name of Irene Chain, Kalinowski, and any variations of it. And the court accepts Irene's request for independent journalists to be present at the trial. It's not a big list, is it?
No, you don't want much, do you?
Well, let's see how the gameplay goes. Let's see where we go with this.
Yes.
Because it did say if I don't turn up at the trial, they're going to go ahead in any case.
Right.
Because
well, you may as well be there then.
Well, you walk into the thing, and the judge is sat at the top, and she's not looking at you, and they've already made their decision. You know that, and
Yes,
they're just stamping the flag. Oh well, there's 50 grand here. How much am I going to get from this? You
yes,
know, and you can see what they're doing, and the people need to know that this is happening and that they shouldn't be scared of it, but confront them. So you have to know what their rules are and follow
yes.
the process. Yes, so I did 3 cease and desist orders. I resigned. 3 cease and desist orders with notification. I gave them 3 notices to cure, 3 opportunities to meet me in the private and come up with a remedy, which they didn't do. And then there's a thing called a G36 notice of to admit facts, which is under their High Court rules. So we asked those questions, and I think you saw them. The questions we asked, did Irene not call Emma Farmer and ask her to email her with her concerns? Did you not perjure yourself and send an email to the Midwifery Council? You prove Irene was working in a clinical setting, yeah?
Yes.
And failure to respond to this or to ask these questions is admission to facts, right? We did several. We sent them to the Ministry of Health and everywhere else, and nobody's bothered to answer. So they're denying their own court rules, right?
Yes.
I sent a sworn affidavit, which nobody reported. Nobody's even mentioned it. So I've done the process as it should be, but they've denied all of that, okay? So the next step is, well, okay, they've denied it. So I've tried everything else, and now we've gone public.
And that's the best thing to do.
Yeah, and now we have to go public. And you see, we've got good midwives cleaning homes and selling real estate.
Yes,
And they're
just to make a living.
And they're bringing, nurses from third world countries. Well, I don't like calling them third world, but like from countries, they're bringing them in so they conform with the rules.
Yes.
But they haven't got the experience, so you're not getting the care in your hospital.
No,
and
that's what it all comes down to, really,
yeah.
isn't it? It's keeping people to conform in a way that is actually not healthy for women.
No. And now let's follow the money. I love following the money, right? So if you follow the money, it's like, okay, so you get a complaint through health and the consumer complaint will go through, right? And it either goes on to somewhere else or it is reported back to the Midwifery Council. Now, the consumers thing might say, well, it's okay, the health and disability cure, there's nothing here. But the Midwifery Council will look at it and say, oh no, this midwife needs supervision. So they'll charge this midwife for supervision or put them through their courts because they're making money on it.
Yes.
And then the poor midwives gain hundreds of dollars of fines and bills to feed a Midwifery Council that is a corporation. So what I revealed about this Midwifery Council, they call them Teatr Batu Kahul Midwifery Council. It's not even registered. It's not registered as anything. And then they call themselves the Midwifery Council. Now, that was registered as a charity in 2006. But oddly enough, it became a corporation in 2018. And if you go before that, it's registered on Dun & Bradstreet.
Yes. Like so many places, I mean, everywhere's registered on Dun & Bradstreet now.
Yeah, so we're all on Dun & Bradstreet.
That's right. We should register ourselves, shouldn't we? In the end, we'll all be registered.
Yeah. Don't forget my 2,600 something listings.
Listen, we're running out. We're running out of time on the show. But thank you so much, Irene, for telling us your story and about the state of midwifery. I think, this is being mirrored across the world in these so-called sophisticated towns in which we should be at the top of our game, and yet we seem to be being pushed down, and the measures are just not very human at all, are they?
No, and what I want to say, it's like it's not just New Zealand, it's midwives across the world, and especially in the Five Eyes. And I think that midwives should not lose faith. Good things are coming, humanitarian projects are coming, and there are people like us that have got these projects set out. We just need the funding to get it out, but now is not the right time. So do not give hope. And to all
No.
the women and families out there, learn about what it's like to have a baby with pregnancy. Share it with grandmother. Have tea mornings. It's free up there. It's rumble.com, my body, my baby in capital letters. Watch it with everybody. Have tea parties and be in control. I've given it to you for free. Okay. And the other thing that came out is look at my new book. I showed it you before.
Yes. My body, my baby.
Proceeds go out there, and I've written the book, My Body, even a song, did a song. So I just want to wish you all well and tell everyone, keep smiling. And instead of crying over what they're doing to you, just laugh at how stupid it is.
Well, you're laughing all the time, and we've seen that in the interview, and it shows that the fear, you've got to ride above the fear.
Yeah, it's
Irene,
taken its toll, but
yes,
thank
I
you
bet.
so much. Yeah, thank you for everything and giving me the opportunity to get it out there, Richard. Thank you.
Well, let's hope that snowballs and more people, and you get more offers and you can publicise this across the world, because it's a very important story. Thank you so much, Irene. Really lovely to talk to you. It's been an absolute joy. And so from me, I'll be back with more monologues and more wonderful interviews. But in the meantime, from down in New Zealand and here in England, from Irene and myself, thank you for watching, and goodbye.